Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at programming our injector data in our Motec M1 systems. In our last training module, we talked about the fundamentals of understanding injector data. That's going to be understanding the fuel flow, the latency, short pulse width, and minimum pulse width, and the effect that it's going to have in terms of how things are programmed in a standalone ECU such as our Motec. So we're going to be talking about some of that and referencing some of that here in this training module. If you skipped over that training module, definitely jump back in to refresh and familiarize yourself with some of the terminology. Coming into this tutorial, it'll make a little bit more sense. Now, we're also going to be discussing the differences between low and high impedance injectors and how to program them accordingly here within the Motec. Now, if we have an injector that's found characterized by Motec in the drop-down menu selection, as we're going to find here in just a little bit, we don't have a whole lot of programming that we need to do. But if we have an injector that we don't find that Motec's characterized and it's not in the drop-down menu, we do have a lot of things to set up and configure, and it's important to understand what all the variables and parameters that we have to populate are going to represent, which is what we're going to discuss here in this training module. We're also going to talk about the fuel pressure and how it ties in to our fueling calculations and what we need to make sure is set correctly based on a return or returnless system and whether we have a fuel pressure sensor fitted into our fuel system or not. Let's jump in here and take a look at where we can find our injector programming information within the workbook I've provided for the training course. So we can see here under the workbooks, we see tuning and setup. I'm going to move over here into setup, and this is going to allow me to jump into my third screen here, injector data. This is where we can do all the programming and configuration for representing our injector information within the Motec. Let's jump in here and take a look at a few things that we need to address first right off the bat. We're going to talk about here the calibration. Now, the calibration is going to be what I mentioned just a few minutes ago here. Calibration is going to be either manual or we're going to set in a drop-down menu one of the many injector sets that we can find here. They're going to be listed by the brand and the part number. Now, if you don't find your injector in this list, that means that you're going to have to set it to the manual option and manually populate your tables. So let's just look here. If we have an injector that's found in the drop-down menu, let's look at injector dynamics. They're going to be found in here. We're going to go down here, keep going down the list. Let's say I have an injector dynamics 1300 cc injector. We're going to grab that and notice that all of the other programming information disappears. So we find that the primary injector latency, which is representing the response time of the injector, disappears. The reference flow or the flow rate or slope of the injector, that disappears. The minimum volume, which is related to the minimum pulse width, disappears. So all of the normal variables that we would have to account for programming our injector data no longer can be edited because Motec has characterized the injector, and all of that is in the background. Now, one thing to note here, which is actually something very useful, if you select any in your calibration menu here, any injector set, such as the ID 1300, that's what I have selected right now, and then we go here and select manual, that will display all of the calibration data for that injector set and allow you to actually edit it and look at it. So for here, we can see things like our reference flow and then the base pressure, they're referencing that, and the injector latency, and the short pulse width, which is all rolled in here to one table. We're going to find that this is all represented here, and we can see everything that we would need to populate or program for the injector that's characterized by Motec within their formatting language. So that's just one thing to note. If you want to access what the injector data looks like, you can do that, again, selecting an injector set and then going back to manual. That allows you to now populate and take a look at what's going on here. Now, what happens if we don't have an injector set in that menu? Well, we're going to have to use this manual option. So right off the bat, we're going to have to go in here and start to populate all of these variables as well as populate our latency or the linearization table. And we're going to have a whole bunch of things to discuss here. Now, before we do this, I want to talk about the differences between controlling a high or a low impedance injector. They're the two injector types that you're going to find available on the market. What we can find here is that if we're dealing with a saturated or a high impedance injector, that will have 8 ohms or higher. If you take a multimeter set on a resistance scale on your actual multimeter selection, and you take the two probes and you probe either tab or tangs that are for the injector, You're gonna find your two leads there on the injector. If you take your meter and you go ahead and measure across those, you're going to find that you'll get a resistance value. So 8 ohms or higher, high impedance. 8 ohms or less, low impedance. Most low impedance injectors are 6 ohms or less. Now in the situation where we have a high impedance injector, we'll be
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.